a mysterious planet, and a band of Earth's most deadly humans. Who will survive? Predator.
Mafia, wake up, wake up.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
Man, who knew? Big ones and little ones. The classic tale of David versus Goliath. Except for David gets his head chopped off.
David gets his head chopped off. Welcome back to the Monster vs. Men podcast, the bargain basement of the monster podcasting airwaves, where two friends try to stay alive and stay connected by chatting about weekly monster movies. This week, as we stay alive, we're discussing Predators. Alex.
Or plural, man. That's when you know things are getting real.
Things are getting real.
Yeah.
When we go plural.
Yeah, we're getting bombastic now. If Aliens taught us anything, your favorite movie, if it taught us anything, this is when things get good. And hey, we're R-rated, so you know it's quality. Just like last week.
Absolutely. Oh, just like last week. When you go R, you know things are going to be great. Whenever it's for mature audiences only, everything's better.
Yeah. So I want to welcome everybody to the Alien vs. Predator Requiem Postmortem, where we're going to talk about our feelings and how we've dealt with things over the last week.
Man, let me tell you, I still can't get over it, but we're going to try with this week's episode. We may be overhyping this episode and overhyping this movie just because of last week, Alex. It's totally feasible.
Yeah. And Eric, I'm glad that I'm joined by you, the man armed with only a knife. We didn't do introductions, so I just wanted to throw that in.
We didn't. And you are the Danny Trejo of the Monsters vs. Men podcast.
Dude, I have never received a more awesome compliment. Thank you so much.
An honorable title bestowed upon you this morning.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would like to thank my wife, Cece, Archer, Gwen, for this prestigious award. Trejo, mi amigo, thank you so much, sir.
Hey, I wanted to say real quick, I liked our executive producer, John.
You liked him? Past tense? You don't like him anymore?
Yeah, I know. I liked his comment that he made on our Patreon page about how the Gamma rating that we give, it was perfect for not AVP Requiem, which we did not give a Gamma rating to, but AVP. I liked how he said that Gamma, like the Gamma tier kind of captured the essence where maybe some of the quality of the film isn't great, but we still appreciated aspects. We still had fun with it. I really liked his kind of deconstruction of our rating system there. If you saw that comment, Alex, did you see that one?
I did. I saw it right before we recorded. And yeah, he's right on the money. Our little Gamer tier is like a nice little sweet spot. He's right. It fits a wide gamut of movies and a nice little place for AVP to be and AVP Requiem to never, ever get close to.
Yeah. I mean, our podcast is probably a Gamer tier.
Whoa. Okay. All right. Hey, there's one thing that our podcast occasionally does, but not very often. That's waste your time. Okay.
That is true.
Which is true. More than I could say but for some Gamma movies. All right.
Ooh. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, enough wasting time then, Alex. Let's get into this film.
Yeah, let's get into
it. This week, the Predator franchise takes its shot at the plural with Predators. With a large cast and a relatively inexperienced director in Nimrod Antal, Predators has a lot to balance. Its setting, its heroes, its villains, and, well, the Predators. But does it strike the right balance? Or does more than one mean it's time to run.
Oh.
What do you think, Alex?
I think this film strikes the right balance in a lot of ways. I think this film provides something for the Predator franchise, something different. This could easily have been a rehash of the first movie because we are back in a jungle, right? We've got all these mercs, but things feel very different this time. We got the alien planet mystery. We got not 3 but 4 predators. An understated mystery with Topher Grace's character, and some memorable characters that some of which only have a few lines of dialogue. Couple that with like a crazy Lawrence Fishburne, and I think you have the making of something unusual. Now, unusual doesn't always mean good, but I think it points that way. Because it's not only that, but again, we are again with these awesome practical effects. Yes, we do have some CG work here, but largely practical effects. And I think this movie does a lot to impress me, actually. I feel like after the AVP films, yes, we liked AVP 1, but after those, I feel like we've gone back to the universe that was established with the first 2 movies. You can feel that in the structure of the drill that we see that Fishburne is hiding in. But I feel like this one is actually online talked about a little down about. And I think it's needless in a lot of ways, but I'm really interested to see what you have to say about this movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it. I really did. I think there are several flaws. So while it didn't strike the right balance all the time for me, I definitely didn't want to run. I'm curious what the discourse is surrounding this one. I have a couple ideas, but yeah, I'll just start with the positives. I was engaged from the get-go with this one, with that intriguing setup. I mean, what a cool idea. If you like the setting and setup here, Alex, we definitely need to get around to watching a movie that didn't earn enough votes in our Monster Madness series, Annihilation, which I think has a lot in common with some of the setup here. The difference being, though, is that we don't really have a forbidden zone in this one. We have a forbidden planet where there is no escape. I really like the cast here as well. You've got Adrian Brody, who I think is always fantastic, though sometimes really hammy in how his character is written. Mahershala Ali brings it in a relatively small role compared to some of the roles he's had recently and has upcoming. And heck, we even have Walter Goggins playing Walter Goggins here. What's not to like? What's not to like?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I agree with you about Royce in particular. I'm a little mixed on some of his early dialogue in the film. I think as the movie goes along, it evens out, and his performance probably elevates maybe an underwhelming dialogue for him at times, but at first it is a little rough, especially when he's like assembling the team. His lines are just like they just feel out of place almost.
Right.
But he does grow on me as the film goes on, especially as we see more and more of his flaws and what he's willing to do to the people around him to get off the planet. It makes him a really interesting character with some depth that we don't see a lot in this franchise in terms of our main character being kind of a bad guy, right?
That's
you
true.
know,
Yeah.
like we haven't had our main character be this morally gray or even black. I would say in some scenes, right? He leaves people behind. He's willing to just do the thing that no one else is willing to do. But what I also like about this film is just the premise. It's like you said, we start out with that awesome intro of them just falling in through the sky. And then the predators have this giant game preserve of hunting just the best of the best. I think it's just so interesting. I love that. But to see how different some of them are is interesting in terms of not just our predators, because they are quite different from each other, but our characters as well, right? We get all these people from all around the world thrown together, and we get like, a typical Russian character, except for he's not actually typical. He's pretty timid, actually, and panicked, right? And normally you get a cold Russian character. This one's not that way. He's actually
he's reminiscent of Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like he has that same sort of vibe, but then he's pulling out pictures of his kids,
right?
And is kind of a softie, I really liked him.
Yeah, he's just a really interesting character, and he doesn't even have that many lines of dialogue, but I think he makes you really care about him. Of course, as soon as you see those kids, he's got a goner, right? But he's like this timid Russian who carries the biggest gun of them all. And then we have a character like Stans, right? This is the Walton Goggins character being playing himself. He's our convict, and we never find out why he is at the top of the Predators list, right? To be sent onto this preserve. Like, why was he chosen? Because he seems kind of useless in a lot of ways. We don't know quite what he did to end up on death row. Like, he alludes to some bad things he wants to do, but doesn't allude, he says, but even that may not be death row worthy, right? So there's something else there that he's been doing. But then we get some of his final moments, right, where he just jumps on this predator and starts shanking it with a knife, and he doesn't even bat an eye, which kind of hints to maybe some of the other things that he's capable of when he's not being this like idiotic redneck, right? And then we get those the guy that's been stranded too long. The nice surprise in this movie, which is Fishburne's Ronald Nolan, this crazy guy who feels like he's gonna help the team because he's got all this tech that no one else has, all this knowledge that no one else has. I mean, he's claiming to killed at least 2 to 3 predators by himself. And I think there's just so much interesting stuff about his background, but we really don't dive into it much, which I appreciate. And instead, this character who could do so much for this team just ends up trying to kill them with smoke inhalation and take all their equipment. I think that's really cool. And there's some other characters that I like a lot, and I'll probably touch on them in our awards. But again, this kind of goes back to the Aliens thing for me, or even the Kong Skull Island thing for me, where I'm enjoying these characters who have really interesting backstories and only a few lines of dialogue. I think that really makes them all pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think this film does that very well. I do have a few complaints personally about this film, and also a few criticisms that I can understand but don't personally hold to. So I'll start with some of those. I can see some not liking the end of this movie. It's not definitive, right? But for me, it works because it's kind of hopeful. Yes. We've got a full arc from beginning to end here. So I'm okay with it ending on a new beginning of sorts, even if it means that we don't know what happens to our main characters, because we have that hope, right? I can also see some not liking Adrian Brody's character, or maybe Adrian Brody in this movie. He's not a typical action hero, that's for sure. He's got an edge, and he isn't perfect, as you said, but that's probably why I like him. You mentioned it, I mentioned it. Some of his dialogue is too campy for the tone of the film overall. And the dialogue is where the writing at times falls a bit flat. So I can understand that. It gets better as the movie progresses, though. So this is not a criticism that I hold to tightly, because I think as the film progresses, his character becomes more and more human. I can also see a criticism that this movie actually doesn't have enough predator, despite having 4 predators, like you said, Alex. In a sense, yeah, it doesn't have a ton. It doesn't have like a ton of crazy deaths, I guess. I mean, lots of people die. But it doesn't have as much predator as you might expect. But when you look at this movie as a whole, it offers so much more than that. So I'm okay with a little less predator if it means we get more character, more setting. For me, I think of a few of my personal criticisms, so transitioning to perceived criticisms to my personal ones. I think a couple storylines feel forced.
Okay.
Fishburne's presence makes sense when we see what happens at the end with our characters, but a lot of that feels expositional, despite a committed performance, no doubt, from Fishburne himself. It's just he wasn't used enough, and his end was gone. Like he was gone in a second for being such a character that really had shown that he was a survival expert. He was gone in the first sign of danger, which didn't quite make sense to me. It made me question his presence in the movie. I don't know if it justifies it by the fact that like him explaining the plot to us is basically what happens. There's one more critique that I have really, but I think I'll save that. What do you think about the movie? My other point about having enough Predator. Does this have enough Predator for you?
Yeah, I think this does have enough Predator. I could see people maybe wanting a little more personality out of the two that die pretty quickly. Well, not quickly, really. They're around for a lot of the movie, but we don't see a lot of what makes them themselves, I guess, in some ways. When our Russian takes out the first one with the Claymore, it's a really cool scene. I like that. And then we also get, later on, we get our Yakuza, who does a little bit of a battle with the Super Predator with the sword fight, right? And what's interesting about the sword fight is it actually says several things about this world that we're talking about. The world itself is a character on its own, and it does have a lot of these horror elements. But what's really cool is we see that these predators are very different from the other ones because they do kill people that are they're unarmed, right? They'll do that on occasion, and they'll also not take off their armor during a one-on-one duel, which is something we've seen in the other movies. They take off the helmet, they take off the armor, the gun. When the Yakuza has the battle with this one, it doesn't take off its armor. It keeps the helmet on, and it keeps all of its stuff on. And I think that says something that maybe these predators don't share the same values as the ones we're used to, which is really interesting. I mean, they use hunting dogs. They do all kinds of things, right? I mean, they set traps for them, whereas typically they just hunt, and they don't like set traps for everybody to be maimed in and all this stuff. Like, this is a very different predator than we're used to, which is so cool. Like, one of my favorite moments, and this is unusual, but one of my favorite horror moments of the movie is how they use Trejo's cuchillo, and he's like sitting in that field, right? And he keeps asking for help.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a great moment. And then when they decide to leave him behind, she does like the mercy killing, and then he talks again afterwards. It's so creepy. It's so good. And I love that. And that's the type of trap that you may not see with the other predator, right? It's a little, I would say, a little disgraceful to maybe do that to. It's not honorable to like maim someone and leave them there, right? And so like this is really interesting stuff. It's great. It's unsettling. And we really just expand on the lore, super predators, warring factions, this type of thing. More of the, we play with that loyalty not loyalty, but the honor that there might be even in these super predators, because he does decide to go toe to toe with the Yakuza, right? It's still a sword fight, even if he does keep the armor on. And which is, again, just another layer. And then also we find out that the predators, whenever they lose, like they're modifying themselves, whether it's genetically possibly or with weapons and tactics. It's really fascinating. I think it really brings this world to life. That being said, though, I would have loved a little more of the human predator team up, like the normal predator team up. That would have been really cool against the super predator, but it didn't work out that way. He gets killed in a one-on-one combat scenario. But it's a cool showdown between the two of them. But really what I love, and everybody before this movie was coming out, I remember the hubbub. Everyone hated that Adrian Brody was going to be in this movie because he's not Arnold Schwarzenegger. So people were upset when Prey came out because, the girl. But they did the same thing with Adrian Brody. It had nothing to do with her being a girl and just not being a jacked up bodybuilder.
That's interesting.
Right? People were so upset about it. But that scene showed that Adrian Brody could handle himself. And it showed the smarts of the character where he lights the fire. He covers himself in mud. But what's really cool about that,
super cool,
isn't it? It's so awesome. I remember seeing that in theaters and just absolutely loving it. But what's really cool is it also really illustrates what Fishburne says, and it's that when they lose, they adapt. And now they've created a new visor setting where they can see a heartbeat. Right? It doesn't look like it works probably pretty well if someone's moving, but if they're sitting still, they can find prey that's just sitting there. So it illustrates that they've learned new ways to get around one of their weaknesses. It's just really cool. The whole finale really works for me. And that goes with Topher Grace's character, Edwin, as well as Isabel. I think that those two, in combination with everything else that's going on at the Predator camp, really make for a really exciting finale where you're not quite sure how things are going to shake out. Like you feel like Brody's going to survive, but how is he going to do it? And it's just really cool. Yeah, we talked about this on MVM Plus, but I think this movie, even though it doesn't get a sequel, which I think it deserves, it feels like, for me, it's got a fulfilling ending, like you said. It feels like it's got a complete arc, and like you said, it ends on a note of hope that I think is really...
Yeah.
That makes me not really miss a sequel as much as I do for something like... I don't know, maybe a good sequel to Alien versus Predator, or maybe, a proper sequel to, as some would say, to Aliens. But really, the sequel that I'm referencing is actually the sequel to Alien Covenant that we're never going to get. But we're not there yet.
Yeah. As I said, the ending comes full circle for me. Yeah. So I mentioned there was one other issue that I have with the film. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't know if I buy the whole Topher Grace, the Edwin storyline for a couple of reasons. Plot-wise, I don't think the Predators would necessarily choose him as prey because he isn't really this alpha type of prey. Sure, he might be a monster and predator in his own right on Earth, but that doesn't mean he's fun prey for the hunting, right? My only explanation might be that they threw a curveball in to the team in order to just add chaos to the group, which I couldn't see our previous Predators doing, but you made a good point about these Predators and having some slightly new rules. Honestly, all of that lore stuff you have a better grasp of than I do, and it's interesting. But so that could be one explanation for that. But he's just not he's not going to kill him. He's not a threat to any of the Predators with a scalpel, right? He's just not. Thematically, too, I think the Edwin storyline comes across a bit heavy-handed. I mean, I get it. Man is the real Predator, Alex. I don't know if you knew that yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it does lean into that a little bit, doesn't it? But I actually like the reveal. You could say that they don't know how he's going to react as part of a team as well, right? Because if he had decided to apply his knowledge of neurotoxin as something to use as a weapon, they probably could have won pretty easily, right? You just tack that thing into a couple Predators and you might be able to put them down. We don't know that for sure, but I would say maybe they don't know how he's going to work in a survival situation. It could be an unknown quantity in terms of being a challenge for them, just because of whatever he is doing back home. But but instead he chooses to only pursue humans, right, and play the dumb idiot.
Yeah. No.
But I get
It's
it.
interesting. Yeah. It just, I wasn't sure. It doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite pull it off for me. But one of the things you mentioned, Alex, was the sequel to this movie, which it never got. But on MVM Plus today, we talk about that sequel, among other things, such as what we did for Halloween, Child's Play franchise, The Hobbit, Avatar.
Lots of James Cameron talk.
And James Cameron's lots of James Cameron Avatar talk. And we do talk about the sequel that was never made for Predators. You can find that over at patreon.com/MVM pod. Receive that episode in our entire backlog of MVM Plus episodes. But Alex, do we have any Patreon feedback this week for Predators?
Yeah. So we have a couple. I sent out the inquiry last minute. That was my bad. The days have gotten away from me. But we did get a couple. Kevin Alexander, he said that it's an underrated gem, the escargot of the Predator franchise. Interesting. I like that. And then Christopher Clavero thinks that they underutilized Lawrence Fishburne, which I think ties into something that you were saying, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that's true.
And I think I agree. I would have loved to see Lawrence Fishburne go toe to toe with a Predator for a minute to show why he's so capable. Maybe even take out the first one instead of the Russian himself, or at least wound one. But instead, he gets blasted into a million pieces immediately. So that was a little disappointing. I can see where you're coming from, Christopher Clavero. And then also, Ken Bachman had this gem of a one. I'd love to give my 2 cents on Predators, but I haven't seen this one.
Well, you need to see that one.
Yeah, and then someone described on Twitter, this wasn't part of my inquiry, but they just kind of responded to, that I was watching the movie. I can't remember who it was on Twitter, but they said something to the effect of, it's the best of the bad Predator movies.
The best of the bad Predator movies.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, is this the best of the bad Predator movies? Well, we'll see. I haven't seen.
Or is this even a bad Predator movie?
We'll see. Compelling character award, Alex. Let's get into these awards. Who do you have?
I had Royce. We have a lot of compelling characters here. Like all of them are really compelling. Even the one that immediately face planted from the parachute drop and died immediately. You want to know, what was his background? Was he better than all these people put together? But his chute just didn't open. But I had to give it to Royce because his background is so interesting, because he seems to be, they're all morally questionable. There's no doubt about it. But the level of his and the tactics he's willing to use to just, to quote John Hammond, spare no expense in terms of life to make it out. Like, he lures people into the Predator camp, but then he sits on the side to see what happens. Right? He does all these cool things, and I just want to know more about him and how, kind of like as Isabel kind of asked him, like, how did he get this way? Because he is so almost inhuman at times compared to everybody else. Because he's making these hard calls that no one else can make.
He makes hard calls, but redeems himself right at the end. And so my compelling character is where he finds his redemption. And it's his foil character, which is Isabel, who is played by Alice Braga. I think Isabel's compelling.
She is.
Because despite she's obviously done some stuff, right? But despite what she's done, and I mean, Royce makes that comparison very clear. Despite what she's done, she still really does have that empathetic spirit. And that trust and that camaraderie that Royce just doesn't have. He's been too burnt. So while you're interested in, well, why is Royce the way that he is? I think another interesting question is, why is Isabel the way that she is, right? What brings her that empathy? How does she still have that empathy despite what we know has been some stuff that she's been through. So, yeah, definitely a lot of compelling characters to choose from in this film.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who's had a moment of screen time, you're like, I want to know more. I want.
Yeah.
What about your most memorable line award?
So I decided to choose the line that we talked about it. Adrian Brody's Royce, who had a couple of hammy, campy lines in the movie. This one was my favorite of those campy lines because I was just able to basically say what he was saying despite not seeing this movie before. He tells the group, we're being hunted. The cages, the soldier, all of us. All brought here for the same purpose. This planet is a game preserve, and we're the game. I literally said when I'm watching this movie out loud, by myself, I say out loud, and we're the game as he's saying it. I've never seen this movie before. It's like you just know what he's about to say, right? And that's a good example of kind of like the predictable dialogue that doesn't quite feel realistic for the character because he doesn't care about being cool, right? And he doesn't care about making these points in this sort of way, or at least he feels like he shouldn't care about it. But he kind of tries to wax poetic at times, which is interesting. But yeah, definitely a little.
Yeah, he's a guy who knows who he is, right? And is also very intelligent.
Oh yeah, yeah. Quotes Hemingway.
There you go.
So. What about you? Your most memorable line
originally I had the line, which I think is really cool, especially if you don't realize that they're on an alien planet yet. Isabel shows him the leaf spinning, and then he says, something to the effect of like, yeah, and there's something else. And she's like, what? She goes, the sun hasn't moved since we got here. It's like, oh. That's unsettling.
Yeah,
but
I had no idea.
Oh, did you not?
I
was wondering if
I had no idea
how quickly you would pick it up because I'm like, I can't remember if that was in the marketing or not. I can't remember, it's hard to remember that first time experience where what you knew and didn't know, right?
No, I had no idea, and that was a great line. That's a great line because that's whenever you kind of were like, oh crap.
So did you have that meme or that GIF moment where you? It's the gif of the guy that's shocked and he just has the face and he starts eating popcorn.
Maybe it's more the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, where he's pointing at the screen.
Oh yeah.
that was me at that moment. Yeah, exactly.
I think that one's good. And then I also like the line when he's talking to Isabel. He says, the difference between you and me is we both do the same thing. You just do it for a country, so you don't have to admit that you like it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good. Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Yeah.
What about your Can't Believe the Acting Award?
This is going to go to the character that you didn't really care for, or maybe you just didn't like the final moment of his, but Topher Grace is Edwin. I like it not because of the performance throughout, but more so it's kind of in that moment where he reveals himself. I just don't know how he was able to make his eyes look like they were looking in different directions. Very impressive. but when he reveals his true self, he kind of like half closes his eyes, and they both go, it feels like, in opposite directions. I'm like, wow, that's totally creepy, and that means that he's been changed. He's like held himself in a certain light until he's finally been able to reveal his true self, which I like. But I was also just like, that's amazing. You're able to, get a wonky eye by doing that. It's cool. But I really do actually like the reveal moment. I know you're a little, you don't quite like it like I do, but I actually do kind of like it.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Mine is Walter Goggins as Walter Goggins.
Are you calling him Walter Goggins?
Isn't that his name?
It's Walton Goggins.
Is it Walton?
It's
Why
Walton.
am I saying Walter? Walton Goggins as Walton Goggins. Because he is definitely the character that we have seen in multiple times, and just makes me think of the Shield over and over again.
Yes.
Alex.
Oh, I know. Anytime I see him, that's all I think about.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I know he is unjustified too, but
yeah, but he's
he's only the Shield for me. That's what it all comes back to.
Dude, it all comes back to that, dude. Yeah.
So Walton Goggins, as Walton Goggins, aka Stans.
Oh man, yeah. I can't wait to. Anytime I see him in something, I am interested in it though, for whatever reason.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what it is, but anytime I see him, I'm like, okay, hey, and guess what? He's part of the MCU, Eric. A little Marvel vs. Men crossover.
Oh really?
He's in Ant-Man versus the Wasp. Yeah, he's like a nobody in the movie, but it's just more of a comedic effect character. But yeah,
I remember that. Yeah, actually, I remember that. Yeah, he's a bad guy. Yeah, of course, he's a bad guy.
Of course he is.
Oh, that's a good shot. Who do you got?
This is when Edwin is alone in the drill, and he's like lighting the flares. Oh, it's so moody.
Yeah,
and like you're waiting for him to get ended right there because he has so many, and then when he throws that third one and it hits the predator, it's so cool. But it's really the close up of him when he lights it and the light. It's just it's perfectly moody.
Nice. Honestly, this is a movie that has a lot of good shots.
It really does.
It's honestly a good movie to look at. There were several that I could have chosen, but I chose a moment maybe more than the shot, but the shot itself was really cool. And it was the long shot of Hanzo and the Predator in the field in the samurai fight.
Dude, it's so good.
It's really cool. I mean, yeah, is it realistic? Probably not. Like, is it set up to just have this moment? Sure. But the moment itself is really cool. So I think it's worth the convoluted setup to get us there. So I'll take it. And I really like the shot. I love that they don't try to they let us see it from a distance. It's cool. It's a good moment. And a good end to that character as well.
Yeah, it's a nice little Billy callback moment too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Unique award, Alex. What'd you have?
I had the bonus alien design, and this is the alien that got dropped in, the first one that they find clues to, and that's the one that has the bugs crawling out of it. Mm-hmm. It's so cool. And as soon as you see it, it's one of those designs where you're like, oh, I want to know more about that thing. Because it's clearly sentient, right?
Yeah.
Much more so than like the dogs that you see and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give a shout out to...
thing that's like tall and lanky.
Yeah.
That one didn't have as...
I think that's the one I'm talking
generic.
About. Wait, which one?
Wait, that's the one you're talking about?
Which one do you think I'm talking about? Yeah.
I thought that one was more generic. I like the dogs more.
I did like the dogs, but I wanted to know more about this thing that has bugs crawling in and out of it. That seems so interesting to me. Yeah. Your generic one is the one I like.
I got you.
All right. What's your bonus award?
My bonus award is the Danny Trejo Award. And that goes to Danny Trejo for being Danny Trejo. So here's to you, Danny Trejo. You received the Danny Trejo Award for being Danny Trejo.
He's one of those actors that does the same role every time, and I don't mind. I don't know why. I love it. Absolutely love it.
I like the cast of this movie. You've got a blend of character actors, kind of B-listers, and some really heavy hitters as well. Some up-and-comers. It's a unique cast. So I like this cast quite a bit. Final thoughts and tiered rating, Alex. I'll start.
Oh, okay.
I'll start. We like to end a little bit more positive. I think you're slightly more positive than I am on this one. So I'll start. This is a upper gamma film for me. There's so much that I enjoyed in this movie. I thought the premise was completely unique. We haven't seen anything like this, really. Nothing like this premise ever. There's some similarities to some other films that I've seen, but nothing quite like this, and not with the Predator franchise. you mentioned some of the lore stuff that I didn't even pick up on. But I think that adds another layer to it. And it really adds to the franchise as a whole. The cast completely works for me, as I said. There are a couple heavy-handed moments. There are a couple storylines that don't quite click. But other than that, I think this is a solid entry into the Predator franchise. And as a standalone Predator film, it's got to be close to the top, even if it doesn't get all the way there. So this is an upper tier Gamera film for me, for sure, Alex.
So would you say that where in your Predator ranking is this? Is it just below the original?
Yeah, I think it's just below the original. It's probably on the same tier, same plane as Prey. I have to consider Prey again. I might have to come back around to Prey once I finish this series up, Alex, because Prey was the first film that we started with, since it was kind of a new release, and it was really the first full Predator film I think I'd ever seen. So I might have to come back around and reconsider Prey again now that I've seen the entire franchise, or after I've seen the entire franchise.
Yeah, I'm definitely rewatching it again for our recap when we do wrap up this series. Good. I'm going to watch it again and really dig my teeth into it. But I guess that leaves with me. This one is a Godzilla tier for me. I agree with you about Brody's dialogue, especially early on, is rough. I do like that the callbacks in here are not ham-fisted in a way that I'm like rolling my eyes. I actually liked them. Brody has a couple lines of dialogue that are Schwarzenegger's, but they don't play off that way, which I really appreciate. Unlike Alien vs. Predator, like where they jam those references in just the worst way.
But that's true.
But I really like the callbacks here. But really, at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to the characters for me, and just how all their stories and mysteries are laid there and not just completely exposed. Actually, I'm okay with Fishburne, his limited availability, I guess, in this movie. I do wish we got a little more out of him towards the end, and actually like the little serial killer storyline there with Topher Grace's character. I think it's a nice little turn, but it's kind of like you said, it is a little ham-fisted with the man is a real monster type deal. But I really like it, and I think the ending is kind of perfectly fine. I don't think we have to have another movie to be satisfied, because I think this is good.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. Alex, next week we watch Prometheus, and it is a prequel. Will it have no equal, or will we need a sequel?
All right. Yeah. Prometheus. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I didn't think about this one at all. Oh, this is a tough one. Yeah. So Prometheus is does it have more? Is the storytelling about as good as BVS and Butthead, or is this a high mark for the franchise? Oh wow! I made myself. I give up. I'm tapping out on this one. It was a good run, everybody.
It's bad whenever I just hear the pause from you after I gave my rhyme.
Yeah, I couldn't rhyme Prometheus, and then I tried to rhyme franchise, and I'm like, oh, there we go. That's it. It's over.
As always, thank you for listening to Monsters vs. Men. You can leave us feedback on this episode at mvmpod.com or email us at mvmpod@gmail.com, and we'll read that feedback on the show. You can follow us and message us on Twitter and Instagram at mvm_pod. Become a bargain basemite at patreon.com/mvmpod to receive weekly bonus content, including special reviews, interviews, and this week's host chat. If you can't join it this time, it's cool. A review or a share always helps. Monsters vs. Men is brought to you by Alex Cornett. Executive producers are Kevin Alexander, Faye Basier, Christopher Clavero, John Freeman, and Michael Herndon. Special thanks to our wives, Rock Band for PlayStation 3, which formed Cell Block B, Louis Loops, Senor Honda, Drew the Collector, our Instagram connector, and you, the listener, for listening. Until next time, don't
forget your helmet that gives you invisibility when you're fleeing a murder scene.
And
try to stay alive. See you all.
Mafia, wake up, wake up.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
I'm tapping out on this one. It was a good run, everybody.